What would you do if one day you walked into a small-town diner and suddenly realized the waitress was your best friend from high school? The same girl who once dreamed of becoming an entrepreneur, winning Ivy League scholarships. And now, she's pouring coffee, smiling through tired eyes, living a life far from the dreams she once held. This is not just another story. This is the journey of Victor, a self-made billionaire who returns to the quiet town of Coldridge after more than 10 years, and unexpectedly crosses paths with Wendy, the girl who once lit up his youth, now living a life that couldn't be further from what they imagined. You're about to witness a quiet yet powerful story. A story where a man who seems to have everything returns, not to show off, but to give back the one thing we all long for, a second chance. This fictional yet deeply human story is filled with emotion and reflection. It invites us to think about choices, fate, and the quiet power of gratitude. If you love heartwarming, emotional stories with meaningful life lessons, hit that subscribe button. Here your heart will be heard, and your memories come back to life. Now, let's begin this journey. Part 1. A familiar face amidst the glare. New York. Dazzling, glamorous, relentless. A place where every street corner could birth a story or bury a memory. On the top floor of a gleaming glass skyscraper in the heart of Manhattan, Victor, a self-made billionaire whose name graced every finance magazine, sat silently beside a half-finished glass of whiskey. On the table, a contract worth over $1 billion, freshly signed that morning. For most, it was the pinnacle of success. But for Victor, the moment felt strangely hollow. He stared out the window at the sea of movement below. Blurring footsteps, honking horns, a symphony of the city, busy but soulless. A quiet heaviness settled in his chest, not from numbers in a bank account, but from something inside him that had been asleep for far too long. Suddenly, without warning, Victor turned to his assistant. "Lauren, cancel the flight to Seattle." "But that meeting is critical," she hesitated. Victor cut her off with a calm but resolute glance. "I want to go back to Coldridge. Tonight." Coldridge, the small town where he was born, where dreams first sprouted in his 17-year-old heart. It had been more than a decade since he last returned. He once promised himself, "I'll only go back when I have it all." Now he had everything: fame, fortune, power. But at this very moment he realized he had nothing if he'd lost the boy who once believed. The car pulled out of New York. Mile after mile, through misty towns and fading golden fields, Victor drifted back into memory. He didn't fully understand why he was returning now. Maybe it was loneliness, or maybe it was a name that kept echoing quietly in his mind. An old look, a wistful smile. Wendy. As the car rolled slowly into Coldridge, Victor spotted a worn old sign. "Welcome to Coldridge, where every journey can begin again." Something stirred in his chest, and at the end of that road, under the faded yellow lights of the Lantern Diner, what Victor was about to see would change everything. Part 2. A face from the past. The car rolled to a stop in front of the Lantern Diner, a modest roadside cafe with a rusty tin roof and soft amber lights glowing through foggy window panes. Despite the years, nothing about the place seemed to have changed, as if time had simply skipped this quiet corner, preserving a rare pocket of gentleness in a world that never stopped moving. Victor stepped out of the car. Each footfall felt like retracing the steps of his youth. The bell above the glass door jingled faintly as he pushed it open. The smell of fresh pie mixed with the bitterness of over-roasted coffee, scents that unlocked a flood of long-buried memories. Inside, a few older patrons sat quietly, sipping their coffee and murmuring over morning conversations. And then, Victor's eyes froze at the counter. There she was, Wendy. Back turned, her chestnut hair pinned up neatly, petite, poised. When she turned around with a tray in her hands, their eyes met. Victor went still. It was her, the girl who once lit his way during the darkest days of his youth. She had been his hope, his quiet inspiration. Someone who left a dream in his heart before it ever had the chance to take form. But Wendy wasn't the same. Her face still held its softness, but her eyes, they carried a quiet sorrow now, the weight of years that had asked too much of her. "Can I get you anything?" she asked gently. The voice was still familiar, but the spark from long ago was dimmer now. Victor steadied himself, answering softly, "A cup of coffee and a slice of apple pie, like we used to." She paused. The words, the way he said them, it made her look closer. A moment of stunned recognition. "Victor?" He nodded, smiling, not the polished smile of a billionaire, but the boyish smile of a young man who once dreamed of leaving this town with her. Wendy stepped back slightly, hand to her chest. "Oh my God, it's really you?" Time stood still. The scratchy jazz from an old radio drifted through the air. The smell of apple pie lingered, and there they stood. He with the glow of distant worlds, she with the quiet ache of everything she'd endured. Victor's voice dropped. "You're still here? After everything you used to dream of?" Wendy looked down, her fingers tightening around the dish towel in her hands. "Not everyone gets the chance to leave, Victor." Her words sliced through him, quiet but sharp. And in that moment, he knew he couldn't walk away so easily, because the story between them, clearly, wasn't finished yet. Part 3. What's left after the dream? After the unexpected reunion at the Lantern Diner, Victor couldn't sleep. He had everything, money, fame, power, but Wendy's eyes that day had stirred something deep within him. They weren't the eyes of a young girl once dreaming of a brighter future far from their small town. They were the eyes of a woman who had stepped back from dreams that never got the chance to bloom. The next day, Victor returned to the diner, not just for coffee this time. He wanted to hear the story behind those eyes. He wanted to know what had kept Wendy in the place where both their journeys had begun. She greeted him with a polite smile, tinged with caution. After some small talk and a long silence, she gently set down her dish towel and sat across from him at the wooden counter stool. "Do you remember the day I got my full-ride scholarship?" Wendy began, her gaze drifting to somewhere far away. Victor nodded. It had been a moment they'd celebrated with tears of joy. "Just a few months later, my dad had a stroke. My mom's health had been fragile for years. My little brother was still in high school. I couldn't leave, Victor. I had to give it all up, college, dreams, everything, to stay and take care of them." Victor's hands tightened slightly, a heaviness settling in his chest. He had imagined Wendy living a different life, brilliant and aligned with the dreams they once spoke of. But in truth, she had stayed, quietly, sacrificing her youth for the ones she loved. "Don't you regret it?" Victor asked softly. Wendy gave a small, wistful smile. "Of course I do. Sometimes I still dream of walking into a college lecture hall, but when I wake up, I'm standing next to my mom in the kitchen, or taking my dad to the clinic, or packing lunch for my brother. And I realize some dreams we set aside not because we're weak, but because we love deeply enough to put others first." Victor said nothing. For the first time in years, he felt small. All the billion-dollar deals, all the high-profile wins, had any of them ever moved him the way Wendy's quiet, unseen sacrifices just had? Outside the diner window, a soft rain had begun to fall. Inside, two people, one who soared through financial empires, one who stayed grounded in humble sacrifice, sat rediscovering a connection that had once been lost, not through grand declarations, but through quiet understanding and the tender echo of something that once was. Part 4. An offer from the past. 3 days later, Wendy received a strange letter, delivered directly into her hands. The envelope was thick, printed on premium cardstock, bearing the name Crescent Horizon Group. Her heart raced. Her palms turned clammy as she read the line, "Meeting at the main office, 9 o'clock a.m. tomorrow. Victor." That night, Wendy couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, uncertain of what awaited her. A confrontation? A polite reunion? Or something far greater? The next morning, wearing the most modest but carefully chosen dress she owned, Wendy stepped into the gleaming high-rise in the heart of the city, a world completely different from the old diner where she worked each day. Victor rose from his chair the moment she entered. His eyes had softened, not the steely gaze of a businessman, but the warm look of an old friend. "Wendy, I've thought about this a lot, and I can't just stand by." Before she could respond, Victor placed a folder in front of her and said, "This is a management position at our East Region office. 6-figure starting salary. Full medical coverage for your mother. Complete college tuition for your brother. But most importantly, you deserve this." Wendy was speechless. She had never dared to dream of something like this. Not because she lacked the talent, but because she had grown so used to stepping back, giving others the spotlight. "I don't want this to feel like a debt, Victor." Victor smiled gently. "This isn't charity, it's an investment. In the woman who once taught me that intelligence and integrity can exist in the same soul." A single tear slid down Wendy's cheek, not from sentimentality, but from the deep, quiet realization that for the first time in so many years, someone truly saw her. Beyond the butter-stained aprons, beyond the sun-worn hands, they saw her worth. In that moment, Wendy understood. Some people leave to chase success, while others stay to protect what's most human. But when those two people meet again, they can write a new chapter. Not from broken dreams, but from real opportunities waiting to be lived. Part 5. Temptation named Ben. Just 1 week after officially joining Crescent Horizon Group, Wendy felt like she was living in a dream. From the tailored outfits she wore every morning, to the mirrored elevator reflecting the image of a confident woman, to the quiet office adorned with greenery and natural light, everything was a world away from the life she had known just a few months earlier. Day by day, Wendy was reclaiming the sharpness and ambition once buried under the weight of daily survival. She embraced her role with diligence and care, unafraid to propose improvements, something that made Victor glance at her often with a mix of surprise and admiration. But that peace didn't last long. One late afternoon, as Wendy stepped out of the elevator, a well-dressed man in a charcoal suit with a smirk half hidden behind polite charm stopped her in her tracks. He extended his hand with practiced ease. "Miss Wendy, I'm Ben, from Orion Capital." That name. She had heard it before. Crescent Horizon's biggest rival, the same company Victor had once declined a multi-hundred-million-dollar merger from. But never did Wendy imagine she would suddenly find herself standing between two powerful forces. "I've been following your work for a while, and frankly, I don't think you should just be a pawn in Victor's game. You deserve more: power, recognition, and freedom." Ben gently slipped a business card into her hand. On it was clearly printed, Director of Project Development, $250,000 a year. Wendy froze. She had dreamed of a life where rent wasn't a worry, where her mother could be treated at the best hospital, where her brother could study abroad. But at what cost? As she stepped out into the street, the city breeze swept through her hair, and a wave of conflicting emotions rose within. Ben wasn't recruiting. He was testing her, testing not only her loyalty, but her integrity in the face of temptation. And in that moment, for the first time, Wendy truly felt it. She was standing at a crossroads. One path led to Victor, the man who saw her worth when no one else did. The other to Ben, a man offering an irresistible price for the most extravagant of dreams. That night, in the stillness of her apartment, Wendy sat by the window, the city lights flickering in her weary eyes. No one could make the choice for her. This time, the decision had to come from her heart and her character. Part 6. Truth and Trust. For days after that encounter, Wendy lived in a quiet storm of inner conflict. She hadn't told Victor about Ben's offer, not because she intended to hide it, but because she couldn't quite name her own emotions yet. Every time Victor walked into the office with that calm smile and steady gaze, Wendy's chest tightened. She knew that if she left, the real damage wouldn't be the broken contract. It would be the loss of something far more fragile, the trust Victor had placed in her from the moment they reunited. One evening, after work, Victor unexpectedly invited her to the rooftop of the building. The space was wide open, windswept, with the soft glow of city lights painting the horizon. He handed her a cup of hot cocoa, then quietly sat down beside her. "Wendy," he began, his voice as gentle as the breeze, "I know what you've been struggling with." She froze. Her eyes shifted away, searching for an escape. But Victor didn't accuse. He didn't pry. "Ben used to be a friend of mine, did you know that?" he said with a faint smile. But when someone stops anchoring their actions in kindness, everything else starts to feel hollow. Wendy bowed her head. For a moment, she felt as if her soul had been quietly laid bare. "You once asked why I gave you this opportunity," Victor continued. "It wasn't about the past, and it definitely wasn't pity. I saw something in you that this world is desperate for. Quiet resilience, the kind money can't buy." At those words, Wendy couldn't hold back anymore. Her tears welled up and fell freely. I almost said yes to Ben's offer," she admitted softly. "But every time I imagined your eyes, the way you believed in me, I just couldn't do it." Victor said nothing more. He simply reached over and placed his hand gently on hers. A warm, steady grip, no demands, no conditions, just the quiet assurance of unwavering trust between two people. That night, Wendy went home with a heart at peace. She hadn't just declined Ben's offer. She had chosen to protect her own sense of worth. And to her, it wasn't a loss. It was a victory, silent, but deeply powerful. Part 7. When Faith Blossoms. On an early autumn morning, soft sunlight streamed through the glass windows of the 20th floor conference room, where Wendy was presenting a new community project she had proposed, offering scholarships to students from disadvantaged backgrounds who had to abandon their dreams of attending college. Her voice was steady, her eyes bright. But what left the board members in awe was not just the content of her presentation, but the commanding presence of a woman who had once worked at a modest diner called the Lantern Diner, now standing confidently as a creative director with both heart and vision. Victor sat quietly at the end of the table, hands gently clasped, attentively following Wendy's every word. There was something profound in his gaze, not merely the pride of a CEO witnessing a talented employee's growth, but the deep fulfillment of seeing something sacred flourish from a belief he had once held. After the meeting, Victor invited Wendy into his office. "Your project has been approved. Everyone is on board," he said, looking up with a gentle smile. "But there's something else I'd like to ask." Wendy looked surprised. "If I were to say, I want you to be not just a part of Crescent Horizon Group, but also a part of my future, would you say yes?" The room seemed to hold its breath. Bowed to dun tree, no rings, no flowers, no elaborate declarations. Just a man who had once lost his past, now wishing to write the next chapter with the woman who had rekindled his heart, with sincerity and faith. Wendy remained silent for a moment, then gently nodded. In that instant, no words were needed. Their shared gaze conveyed everything. Months later, the Lantern Diner underwent a transformation into a warm, inviting space. A place for awarding scholarships, hosting career guidance sessions for young people, and serving meals to the homeless. There, Wendy still personally ladled soup for the elderly and greeted each student who walked in with a gentle smile. People often said that Victor had saved Wendy, but few knew that it was Wendy who had healed Victor from his wounds, from the loneliness hidden behind billion-dollar deals. Amidst circumstances that seemed impossible, they chose faith over calculation. They chose heart over contracts. Because sometimes, the most valuable things in life aren't found on financial statements, but in the way an ordinary person chooses to live with kindness, even when the world rushes by. Wendy once thought her life had ended at the Lantern Diner, where she survived day to day on tips and memories. But it was in that very place where fate quietly shifted when Victor returned. He didn't just offer her a job, he offered her a second life, a chance to continue her education, to care for her ailing mother, and eventually, to create a scholarship fund for kids just like them, poor but rich in dreams. But what truly stunned everyone wasn't what Victor gave. It was the choice Wendy made. When Victor's rival, a wealthy, manipulative man, offered her an irresistible deal, Wendy stood at the edge of everything. Money, power, betrayal. What happened next? We'll leave you speechless. She didn't take the easy way out. She chose loyalty. She chose the memories of their youth. She chose a future she could build with her heart. Because sometimes, humanity isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in trust. If you believe this world still holds kind souls and relationships worth keeping, leave a comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay with us through more stories that touch the soul. This isn't just a video. It's a reminder that goodness still exists. And it starts with you.